We're here today to talk about Fidelio because it's an opera that I think has got a lot to tell us in terms of what its themes and what its characters can inform our present world society. I think it is a work that doesn't enjoy perhaps as much reputation in the opera repertoire as many others. And there are reasons for that. It's definitely not a perfect opera. But nowadays, considering what are the upheavals that our societies are going through, I believe it becomes possibly even more relevant to talk about Fidelio and what it can tell us.
In a way, I'm surprised that you think that this opera doesn't have the status that perhaps you would like it to have.
Yeah.
My impression is that it does, among a great broad spectrum of the music-loving public. It is, we would say, a popular opera. It's very moving, it's very thrilling for people who don't necessarily find Wagner, for instance, easy. It's very direct opera. It's creaky, and this comes from the fact that Beethoven didn't have much experience of writing genuinely theatrical dramatic music. And above all, the very great problem of going from spoken dialogue into singing, from singing into spoken dialogue, to find singers who can do the dialogue really beautifully and powerfully and poetically, so that the level of the experience doesn't drop because the singing stops and the orchestra stops. That's the biggest problem. But the other aspect of it that is so challenging every time one does it is the fact that he didn't write easily for the voice.
It almost seems like the orchestra is competing with the voices.
Can you give me an example
I
of
can
that?
think of about, for example, the crucial Sterbe moment just before O Namenlose Freude, where there's this quartet fighting with this raucous orchestra that almost seems to overtake.
Well, that's a very good example of his lack of experience. His ability to write with excitement in the orchestra is terrific. I mean, it's very hard to play, it's very energetic, and the orchestra always makes a lot of noise.
Yeah.
But he doesn't understand about how to write the tessitura of the vocal parts so that they will always be heard. The role of Pizarro, for instance, is so difficult because it has some high notes, but it lies a bit too low for the emotion in the music.
There's a lot to say about the extent of the struggle that Beethoven had in producing this work. And of course, part of it goes back to what you were saying earlier on, that he was not an experienced writer to the opera. But at the same time, I think there's a great will from his side to try and achieve something in a musical form that at the time was still considered to have its best achievements in the works of Gluck and Mozart before.
There were a few things, weren't there? He longed to be a success as an opera composer because in Vienna it was such a central part of the experience of the public, even then, the operatic experience. And it was the highest ideal to be able to, in the theatre, to communicate with the large public in a drama of great power and idealism. And of those, the heroism of the story very much appealed to him, didn't it? And it tied in with the fashion for a rescue opera. And this is something that we've lost nowadays. We're not, the general public is not so aware of this as a particular form. And one shouldn't forget that one of the problems with putting on the piece is this poor character Marcellina, who is so strongly present in the first act and engages our sympathies very, very tellingly at the beginning when she sings by herself about how she's completely swept away by the power of Fidelio, this new young man, she thinks, who has come to live with them. And she thinks it's like a God-given opportunity for her to find her life partner. And then at the end of the evening, she's left there having to cope with the fact that actually it was a woman in drag.
Yes, quite disappointing.
Really tricky. But there were so many problems. How to make the libretto tight, so that his music would expand into it and not make the whole thing too long. And he revised it, and he knew he hadn't succeeded. He wasn't happy.
Yeah,
but by the end, he
At the end of
was.
his life, he would still say that he would consider Fidelio to be his greatest work.
Yes.
Which is an interesting statement to make. Whether we never know whether it was a provocative kind of.
Yes. Do you think it's his greatest work, Raffaello?
No, I don't think it's his greatest work. But I think.
What is? Do you think?
I think what probably I consider to be his greatest work is the Fourth Symphony.
The fourth.
Yes.
You have completely silenced me. That was the first symphony I ever conducted.
Okay.
When I knew nothing about conducting.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I find that absolutely remarkable that you would say that.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, the Missa Solemnis is an incredible achievement.
Speaking of Missa Solemnis, and there's one interesting thing about Fidelio that I personally have never been able to get to grips with, which is the role of God. In the narrative of the opera, we've got this directional thrust and pull that it's almost condensed in this crowning moment that happens in the second act. Most importantly, I would say this beautiful chorus scene with the soloists, O Gott, welch ein Augenblick, this F major moment.
Welch ein Augenblick. When she is allowed to take his chains off.
Yes.
And
exactly.
that is the moment that
Yeah.
produces this extraordinary intensity. And you could say that the whole opera has been working towards
that
this moment, and that he
Absolutely.
manages to find music to express what everybody feels. It's so still,
It is.
and everybody, you know what I mean, on the stage. It's like a piece that it doesn't belong in an opera. It seems like it goes into another realm.
Into another space.
When you cast the heavier voices, this lyrical music is of course much harder because they have to refine their voices back.
Speaking of extremely hard sort of vocal situation, one thing that comes to mind is in the wonderful quartet in the first act. We meet Rocco for the first time.
This lovely quartet at the beginning expresses the dreams of three of them and the frustrations of the fourth.
Do you think this quartet belongs to that space that we were mentioning about the sort of the final? I mean, it's clearly a very different moment in the opera. It comes much earlier on, but it sort of gives the impression that it belongs to a higher, space again, right?
I think he instinctively he had the ability to find music that would take the basic, rather trivial situation into a more spiritual, elevated, and he would level, and he would do that through his music. And the sound that comes at this moment, if you think about it, the sound in the theatre of this moment is of silence. There is a silence in the drama.
You hear the shallows.
Nobody speaks for a very, very long time, and when they do, they speak to themselves.
Yes.
So the characters go into a bubble. If you've never seen the opera, and you start with this duet with these two bickering a little bit, you certainly don't expect this. And that's great. I think it's one of the greatest moments in Beethoven. This is also the first time we hear the main part, Leonora herself sing in this quartet. And we have a chance to look at these people. What I mean is that although this is sublime music, it is actually a dramatic silence. What Beethoven wanted people to be moved by is the knowledge that this disguise was happening and that the whole of the first 3/4 of the opera was under tension because of that. Would she be found out? And this is the effect of the rescue opera. I mean, this was a very recognized scheme, as it were. Would the disguise work? Would the rescue actually come off? And I think that what keeps the opera going is the immense courage and dedication and shrewdness of the woman the wife,
Yeah.
determined to find the husband.
This is a new element of having such a female character that takes the scene in the quality of a hero.
In Fidelio, there's something more, of course, down to earth. I mean, here we are in a dungeon. Here we are in an awful prison, you know, where these men are imprisoned, and this jailer and his daughter are trying to lead a bourgeois life. And Leonora's coming into this seems so strange to begin with, when you realise what her dream is when she sings this big aria.
Yeah.
And she doesn't employ God's help, she implores hope, Hoffnung, doesn't she?
Komm, Hoffnung.
Yeah, komm, Hoffnung. I think this opera, for him, was such a powerful subject because in the end, it celebrated the power of human relationships. It celebrated the need for love in all our lives. And that this couple were at last put back together again in this namenlose Freude, this nameless joy, an unspeakably poignant joy that they both experience. And he would have related to that. He would have had no problem, I'm sure, in finding the right notes, the right tempi, the right thrust in the music to express that. I don't think that the opera has any part to play in his view of women in society. I think he wanted a woman in his life.
Another thing that strikes of Fidelio is, of course, the proportion, right? So it's a Singspiel in the most standard operatic repertoire. I think the closest example would probably be the Magic Flute, in fact. And the structure of the Singspiel is incredibly, if you want, awkward to handle, because a pretty lengthy first act is followed by a much more condensed second act, where also there's no really the concept of aria anymore, but it goes into a series of scenes.
The scheme in the second act is very powerful because it's very simple. The first number is an aria.
Yeah.
The second number is a duet. The third number is a trio. The fourth number is a quartet. And from the quartet, there's this very breathless climactic duet for the husband and wife. And then there's everybody. Then there's the finale. So it's like the whole act is like a crescendo.
Yes.
It's more multifarious, the first act. Yeah, it's more full of contrasts. In the second act, we start, as you say, in the darkness, and we go to the light. The problem that remains for us all as performers and interpreters is making the dialogue so powerful and so intense and so well done. First of all, choosing the words. You know, do you stay with the original words, or do you cut them, or do you rewrite them? What do you do? But you have your words, and then you have to persuade the cast how to do them, to train the cast to do them well enough so that you keep the excitement and the intensity. That's really hard. But of course, for the original Viennese audience, it wouldn't have been so much an issue because that was the form that they were used to.
One way in which I've somehow tried to interpret this relationship between Beethoven and its use of voices has been the one of trying to imagine how he could not accept the fact that a musician or an artist on stage should be there for, an aesthetic purpose that was not higher. And therefore, his sort of irreducible attempts at making the vocal lines so difficult to handle was actually a statement of the fact that, ladies and gentlemen, we're here because we're dealing with something much higher, and therefore we really don't care about whether it's difficult. We have to make it. So it's a statement of goodwill.
Perhaps what you're getting to, which I think is really interesting, is that the effect can only be achieved by the struggle.
By the struggle, exactly. It is all about that, really.
It's aspiration.
Aspirational. And I think this places Beethoven in a very special place in the history of music, because it's not anymore about the perfect piece of art that we look at when it's done, but it's about, you know, the role of art as a struggle for an ideal that we will never necessarily quite get there, but the very process of conquering is what makes it really valuable and what makes it worthwhile.
It can't be an easy journey, and he's asking the audience to be ready to come on this difficult journey, and you can hear that right from the beginning and in so many of his works. This final duet for the husband and wife when they're reunited is like a big heroic version of Papageno and Papagena at the end of Zauberflöte. Same key, same fast tempo. You know, they're quite parallel.
You have these 4 bars of almost gearing up, and then these 2 voices that are basically chasing each other. But they have to do a crescendo from piano to fortissimo. They have basically 1 bar.
It's like a vocal E-type jag, isn't it? You've got to come to 60 miles an hour from nothing in no time at all.
In no times,
And that quality, that heroic quality in the music, is something that he started. And of course we must do it. We must try and find the singers who can really manage it and still be convincing as artists. I love it. I think for all its imperfections, I love it. I think it has moments in it that are some of the greatest in opera. I really do. It's not my most favourite opera as a whole thing, but I love the musical numbers, and I think that they have incredible variety, incredible intensity, and I just hope that everybody will try and find the secret of it, because there's not one secret, is there? There are so many different ways you can do it, and you've got to cast it well. That's really, really important, because the audience's appreciation, the audience's experience of this journey that she makes right from the very first moments of the opera to the end, when she takes the shackles off his arms, his wrists, is such a great journey. You know, as you said, it's one of the great heroic journeys in opera, that we must all go on trying to do it better and better, and finding people who can do it well.
Mark, thank you very much for this wonderful chat, which I enjoyed a lot. I hope you enjoyed it too.
Absolutely. And very best wishes for the Fidelio restaurant. You know, this has got to come to life again, hasn't it? And I hope that as these weeks go by, it'll be populated with musicians and hungry people. And
or people interested in music generally.
The fact that you've named the restaurant after Fidelio is great for the aspiration of Beethoven, that you're aspiring and inspiring, and I think it's lovely, and he would be really pleased to come and eat here.